Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to this panel on RIIAA, this Diversifying AI panel on RIIAA. I'm Rita María del Rio Chanona. I'm a JSMF Research Fellow at the Complexity Science Hub in Vienna. Joining me in the organization of this moderation and panel is Jennifer Enciso, coordinator of Wikipedia and co-founder of RIIAA. And I'll leave her to give the introductions.
Thank you, Rita. We are delighted to have you in this panel. You are three outstanding women who are leaders in the AI ecosystem. Joining us today are Bibiana Pulido, who is a co-founder and executive director of RIIAA and head consultant at CIDI, where she focuses on promoting innovation, diversity, and inclusion. Bibiana holds a PhD in human resources from the University of Montreal. On the other hand, Haydé Martinez Landa, who is a senior data engineer in Wiseline and founder and CEO of the Mexican Data Science Academy, De Cero a Ciencia de Datos, Haydé has a graduate degree in artificial intelligence from the Kanazawa Institute of Technology in Japan. Last but not least, Priscila Chaves is the director of the Transformation Office of Cargill and executive director of the Latin American Innovation Agency 10X Impact. Priscila is also country coordinator for the Inter-American Development Bank Ethical AI Observatory. Priscila holds a business degree from Universidad de Costa Rica and MBA from NYU.
Perfect. Well, thank you for this good introduction, Jennifer. And without further ado, I'd like to start the panel and asking some questions. And if I may, Bibiana Pulido, I'd like to start with you. And I'd like to start broad. What is diversity and why is it important?
Okay, thank you, everyone. Great to be here. Oh, diversity. It might be like a simple concept to define, but it's a bit more complex than what we could think. When we talk about diversity, we see diversity as something very, very global. We could talk about identity, gender identity. We could talk about race. We could talk about social class. We could talk about language, age, religion. But what's important with diversity is to see it like in this perspective of intersectionality. And when we talk about intersectionality, is the fact that the identity of one person is not related only to one characteristic. So it's not only, for example, related to race, but really this intersection between, it could be gender identity and race. For example, where the concept came from was a lot from the fact that Black women in the United States lived some situations of discrimination. So the idea behind diversity really is to approach this diversity of yes, identities, but also perspectives, expertise, which are really important in our field of AI. So, and I may not be living right now in Latin America, but I come from a Latin American country, and one of the important things to outline is that we are very, very diversified as countries, and we have to take into account that richness and put it in our research, put it in our practice, in our organizations, and to benefit, obviously, everything that is done in AI.
Perhaps we think that it should be very clear for everyone what are the benefits of diversity and inclusion in areas like the AI LATAM ecosystem. So, but it is not that obvious for everyone. So I would like to listen from Priscila or Haydé. What do you think are the benefits of inclusion and diversity in our field in AI, in the AI ecosystem?
Should I go first? Okay, thanks. It's a great question. And thinking about what Bibiana was calling out, when we think of diversity, it's important to remember we live in worlds that are complex. We live in systems that have been built to serve specific purposes, and those purposes are not serving all. So how can we create solutions technical, societal, political solutions that are going to have everyone's interest at best. So think about intersectionality, really. When we think about our region in Latin America, it's not only a gender gap that we need to fill with technological or political solutions, it's also socioeconomical, race, orientation, the fact that we live in a region that is vastly diverse in itself. We cannot think about Latin America as a common culture. So how do you bring all those topics together and start generating value for all people? So when we think about the benefits, let's also assess the risks, if not first, before benefits. Some of the risks that are associated intrinsically with the benefits are the risk of having societies that are no longer serving what's best for everyone, but only serving what's best for a few. The benefit of the alternative would be to generate ecosystems that are constantly allowing for society to trust the different institutions that have been elected in order to sustain that order and sustain that overall well-being. Another benefit and risk associated with it might be the risk and the benefit or the opportunity of societal progression. And how can we uplift everyone? How can we identify and really understand everyone that is living below the poverty line, and be able to trace what type of impact each of our policies are having on those individuals? How is it that we can better track health, education? How can we better track progression, societal progression from those that are living at the bottom of the pyramid, in order that we can generate solutions, not only technological solutions, but overall that are going to serve them first. And the third benefit, I would say, is probably the ability to progress as a region. I think when we think about the AI ecosystem, it's very common that we would think about the global north as the ones leading the development, leading research, leading from a commercial perspective. But what is it that the global south has to offer when it comes to talent and capacity building? The things that are going on in sub-Saharan Africa, the startups and projects that are being driven from Latin America, how can those projects push the bar and become and scale globally, and then make Latin America as well a place where the entire world would come to invest and would come to look for solutions that can create overall well-being for the entire world. So I think those would be the three benefits that I would call out.
From my side, first of all, I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and really, it's an honor for me to share this panel with amazing women. Thank you all. And when we think about diversity, I think very important subjects have been already mentioned by Priscila and Bibiana. But if we go to the technical side of the AI systems, we can talk about bias. If we don't have a diversity in a team, we can fall into our own bias as developers, right? There's thousands of examples of systems going wrong because of the internal bias of the development team, right? So it's not only, I think it's not only a question of having diversity in our team, but also focusing on the diversity we're including in our data sets, in everything we're doing, right? Sometimes we can see that some minorities are being rejected or treated differently by models, by pre-trained models or trained models. And this concept is really what worries me the most. We're going to live in a system, we already live in a system that is that is almost surrounded by AI systems. But what does that mean? And I think that has a lot to do with what Priscila was saying about societies being ignored. And if we focus on diversity, both inside our teams and inside our datasets and inside our techniques, we can reduce the risk of having bias inside our AI systems.
Perfect. That's a great way to start talking about intersectionality, talking about this global south that we need to start pushing forward. And yeah, of course, the grand issue with bias that I think many panels have talked about it. So on this, to dive a bit in deeper, Bibiana, I would like to ask you, what are those common misconceptions we sometimes have about diversity or women in AI? And how can we combat this misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
Well, I think it has to do like a lot about what we've mentioned, Haydé has mentioned, like you mentioned in other panels of the conference. Quite a lot is related to unconscious bias. You know, when we look at unconscious bias, we have to look at it at different levels. We have to look at it at an individual level. We have to look at it at an organization level. And we have to look at it also as the impact that it could have in society. And unconscious bias has an impact, even like when I'm talking at the individual and the organizational level, has an impact of the types of discrimination that we have in our society. Discrimination related, and we could go to, for example, racism that we've been talking a lot, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and so on. And one of the stereotypes, because stereotypes are not synonym of unconscious bias. Stereotypes is an unconscious bias, and we have the stereotype that women are not good in tech, women are not good in engineering, they're not good in the field of STEM. So this bias obviously has an impact on the representation of women in AI in tech, and obviously there is very few women that want to go in this industry because they have themselves that type of bias and say, well, they're raised, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be good to go in this field, and so they don't go in this field. And once these women, and we've seen a lot of cases in the media, once these women are in the field working in AI companies and tech companies, well, we've seen that there's a lot of discrimination against them. There's a lot of harassment. We've seen cases of sexual and physical and psychological harassment. So this has an impact too on the fact that women, seeing that there's these types of discriminations, don't want to go in that industry and don't want to stay, because some of them stay but are going to leave quickly that industry. So what could be done? I think that was part of the question, right? What could be done? Well, I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on unconscious bias. I think a lot of training, education is done to that. But what some companies, organizations are doing is that they're all like training their employees on unconscious bias, and they've checked the box, and everybody is not biased anymore. So it's a work that needs to be done. It needs to be done every day, and we have to work as individuals in the introspection, and how we could work on our unconscious bias, and how it could have an impact in our organizations and abroad. And I think that there's beautiful programs putting in front to include women in AI. This has to continue, but once we include these women in these organizations, we have to make sure that they're in a safe space, that they're valued in their industry, their expertise is valued, and we make sure that those cases of harassment, discrimination are not accepted, and people that are responsible of this, they should be, how could I say, I'm not saying like, but they should know of this, and they should know they have a negative impact on the presence of women in the AI field. Well, more or less, I'm pretty sure my colleagues are going to be much better at giving more solutions.
No, you did just fine. I was just like, yes, whatever she said, I'm with you.
Thank you.
I just want to add, I agree totally in what Bibiana is saying, and I'm not trying to be harsh or criticize, but we have a lot of these kind of panels, full of women panels of diversity in AI, women in AI, women in AI. But why don't we have full female panels of female tech panels, right? We are always relegated to the diversity subject or the female subject, and it's okay. I mean, we are starting to be present in these panels, but I think if a girl is out there watching these conferences, then she's not seeing our technical impact. She's just seeing what we think about diversity and what we think about our jobs. But she's not watching us talk about our models or about the new algorithm we are researching or whatever, right? It's just our feelings. So I think sometimes in my personal situation, I began my career at Intel, and there was a ton of women who were managers. So I thought immediately that I needed to be a manager. I had to be a manager because all females were managers, until I found two girls. These two girls were extremely technical. They were always in the technical path. And then I realized I could be technical too, because I love coding and I love all those things. And this like opened my mind and was like, I can also do technical job and code all day. So it's okay. I mean, these panels are really good, but if we try to become or to have more women involved on a board, on our boss, we need to show what we do in our jobs, right?
Yeah, and I love that, Haydé, because I was just thinking that I didn't grow up looking at this group of women. Like I didn't, when I was growing up and having to choose a career and to think about my future as an adult, I didn't have women in tech role models. So if a bunch of girls were to be looking at this, were to be listening to us, I think they would definitely feel that they can become because they can see it, right? I didn't have anyone else to look up to. Probably you didn't either. But if girls right now were to be able to see that Latina girls that look like them, that have brown skin, that have an accent, that have an attitude, and that can push people because they want to go first, then that's the type of message that we need to start showing. And it's not only women fighting for women and women advocating for women's space. We need decision makers. And at this point, guys are at the decision table. So we should be inviting men, the men that are responsible for promoting more women in tech and in leadership, to have these type of conversations. They should be the ones taking the unconscious bias training. They should be the ones being sensitized to this topic, not us. Like, we know we are discriminated. Like I've been speaking about this topic for years now. Like, I know where my discrimination level is. We need the guys that are the people that are actually making decisions to not only be aware of this, but advocate and pledge that their results are going to also be directly related to how many minorities they are elevating. So that's the type of change. And I honestly think that, like, time's up. We really have no more time. We need to make this happen right away.
Yes, thank you. I think actually this type of panels and discussions are good because these good ideas come up and we can make it better also from our side. I would like to highlight some things you mentioned of what we can do different or what decision makers can do different. One part is giving this type of courses, or these courses that they think like is the only thing they can do in the companies, but give it like more targeted, right, to the decision makers, not to the women or the all the employees, because they know that they are perhaps being discriminated or not, they are not an inclusive company. So this should be more focused to decision makers, have this type of panels with decision makers also to make them aware of what is happening, what the people think about their strategies. And I would like to ask you that if you didn't have this type of role models that you were talking about, we didn't grew with these women role models to follow in the path of technology, what drove you to this path? What made you think on having a technology career?
I can begin if that's okay. On my personal story, because we're all going to talk about a personal story, of course. My dad was a civil engineer. He worked on construction, right? And I wanted to be just like him. And he was like, construction is not for females. So you can be an engineer, but look for something that is more like good for a female, right? So then I tell a story that we never had like a microwave or TVs in my house, but we always have computers. We always had like tons of computers and tons of discs and CDs and all of those things. So I actually learned to use the computer before I learned to cook, maybe. And at that point, I didn't even realize that I wanted to be in technology, but I was really interested in how machines work. How does it happen, right? How do I see images? How does text gets processed and things like that? One day, my dad stopped me when I was about to crash a monitor with a hammer because I saw a commercial on TV that a girl went inside a TV and she was like swimming in the TV. He was like, no, that's not real. So I think it was the need to understand all these things. And then I realized I was really geek when I was a little kid in junior high and things like that. And I was bullied because I was smart, right? But that didn't throw me apart from being smart. It was like, I'm smart and I like it. And I like that now being smart is cool. Being geek is cool. Back in my days when I was younger, it was not that cool, you know? But I knew I was smart. Somehow I knew I was good at math, or somehow I knew I was good at those things. And everybody said that STEAM was hard. You know, it's complicated. You have to study a lot. It's made for males. You have to be super logical and dedicate all of your time. How can you do that if you were going to be married and have kids? I didn't care. So I just went ahead, and that's how this happened. AI specifically happened when I didn't even knew the name, the term AI when I was younger. But I worked, one of my first jobs was as a receptionist in a place that sold cameras, for security cameras and automatization and all those things. And they were working on the first steps of a model that could read license plates. And I wasn't even in engineering school back then, but I got amazed by what they were doing. But they were guys, you know? But somehow I never saw that as a stopper. I don't know. It never came to my mind. I remember saying when I was younger that I wanted to be like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, things like that. And it never came to my mind that they were males and they had privileges, more privileges than I had. It only came to my mind when I joined my first companies. That's when I realized how hard it was being a female in this area. But I changed the subject completely. That was my story.
Okay.
Yes, it's amazing.
Oh, second.
Yes, go, Priscila.
I love it. Thank you for sharing your story like that. So I come from a family of business people. Actually, my stepdad is watching this panel. So hi. So I literally didn't know what to do. So I studied business, and then I quickly joined IBM, one of the biggest companies in the world on tech. And I felt completely at loss. Like I I thought like I wasn't a tech person. Like I shouldn't be doing tech projects, but I started doing tech projects and it worked fine. And then all of a sudden I was working with like the brightest people and I felt completely at loss. And then I was somehow able to do it. And then I felt like starting a company on data, but I had no technical background. So I freaked out and I went and did it. So it was mostly a series of events that led from one challenge to the next. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I dropped the entire tagline of I'm not a tech person, because I had spent my entire adult life working in tech, launching businesses, driving projects, creating solutions as a business person. But in reality, I finally came to embody the women in tech in me. And then in these previous years, I got very interested and very involved with climate change, but I wasn't a scientist and I wasn't a woman in climate change. So I immediately adopted the tagline of, no, I'm a woman in tech. I'm not a woman in science. I'm not a woman in climate change. So I grew aware of it and then started to just make things happen and started to like study and connect with people until the point that I am now able to say, yes, I am both a woman in tech, and I'm also advocating and working towards climate change. So what was in the middle of this entire story was an obsession, almost a fascination with data. And how is it that data can drive change in such a massive way that it can change millions of people's lives? And that became my life mission, basically. How is it that I am going to use data in whatever shape or form, in whatever platform or format, and I'm already working in 3 different projects in order to make sure that this transition that we're living as humankind is going to be an ethical transition. It's going to be for the best and to allow and ensure well-being for every single person in the planet. So that's my story.
Okay. Well, Priscilla, you're probably not going to be happy with me, but I'm not a woman in tech. I'm more a researcher, and I've done research in the tech industry, especially in the video game industry. So I've looked at the Quebec and the Swedish video game clusters and looked at career paths of people in the industry. And I've looked at career paths of women in the video game industry, which we could relate also to the industry, the AI industry. But I wouldn't consider myself. I don't work in a I don't work in a company that works in AI. I've worked more on the research side. I worked before as a at the Observatory of Social Impact in Montreal, in Quebec. So I think I see this in a different perspective, and more people sharing with me their experiences and their knowledge.
That's fantastic. A very complete set of panelists. And we're talking about it's not about it's not about having this panel like, oh, let's just talk about diversity. We're talking about sometimes you've talked about like we felt only men could make it, but then we could make it. And I want to ask you, what was the moment when you said, I am a woman and I can make this, and because I am a woman, I can give this particular perspective in tech? Let's say I understood certain bias, and exactly because I'm a woman, I can give this particular contribution, either in tech or in research. Bibiana, you also have this, this great, you consult firms or increase diversity, and how does your woman perspective give you an advantage on the ecosystem? At the moment, it's male dominated, but yeah, I'd like to, what was the moment you said, I am a woman, because of that, I have this unique perspective, and that's what's going to drive me as well?
I can start. We'll be taking turns on who starts each question. So I do have a very specific moment, and it wasn't necessarily because I am a woman, but I happened to be in a situation where it just felt very natural to and very obvious that I didn't look like anyone else. When I left IBM after 10 years working for them, I decided I wanted to do something completely different, and I wanted to learn as much as possible from the startup ecosystem. So I moved to Uganda, to Eastern Africa, and I co-launched a project on data monitoring and evaluation. And then our customers were going to be our clients for this company were going to be NGOs and social enterprises. But at the end, the users of our tech were going to be people living in rural villages in both in northern Uganda and in Kenya. And we sent a bunch of guys, basically tech guys, to understand what the requirements were. And they went into the villages and they came back with nothing. They came back with absolutely nothing that could be remotely useful from a user experience perspective. And then we were like shocked, like, what happened? You are the brightest. What went wrong? So I did the trip myself with a few colleagues, and the users were women. Users were women that had been either widowers from the wars that had been the conflicts that had been happening in the region for decades now. Or they were children, young women, young adults, and they just couldn't connect with tech guys that showed up saying, "Okay, tell me, what do you need? What do you need in an online app?" Clearly, that wasn't going to do the job. So it wasn't because I was a woman only. It was because I brought a different perspective. I didn't speak the way that these other people spoke. I sat down and ate lunch with them. I accompanied them while they were collecting eggs from their chicken farm. And I think I just took the opportunity to really empathize with my users and to understand what was it that was aching them, what were their pain points. And I don't like generalizations. I don't think this is a women quality. I don't think men are incapable of empathy. That's completely untrue. But I do think that coming from a different background, where I didn't grow up in labs, I didn't grow up in making code. I grew up in from my professional standpoint on the streets, like negotiating and making sure that I understood what my clients needed. And that's what helped me in that particular moment. And it was then where I recognized that in the AI ecosystem or in the tech ecosystem, diversity means everything. It's not a plus. It's not a nice to have. The only way to create solutions that can impact people's businesses or societies is to have a diverse team looking at everything that is happening around and making sure that the solution is as complete as possible.
Priscila, I think that your example is really, really good to make emphasis that diversity should not only be in teams, but also in planification for user experience. Now, we cannot think on creating or building solutions without thinking on the final users and how diverse is this group of users. Bibiana, please, do you want to add to this question?
Yeah, is it just, could you just clarify, Maria, the question, because I lost
Sorry.
a bit.
Yes, I guess the question I mistook when I said it was like the moment you realize, at the beginning we started with intersectionality, right? It's not only about women being a woman, it's about, the whole background. What was the point in your work, either in your career or in someone else's career, or when you were consulting with a particular firm, that you said this particular thing, like, women, I think in Uganda was adopting this part, you have to, emphasize with them. And Priscila mentioned she could do it because she had this really diverse background. And what was a moment like that where you thought, because of my background, because of my intersectionality, being a woman, being a Latin American, whatever it is, led you to something that you think someone else couldn't have done?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for repeating the question. I think I realized that a couple of years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, I acknowledge that I'm a very privileged person. You know, I come from a privileged background, just the fact of being here in Canada and Montreal, to be working in the universities. Before that, I didn't quite realize the privileges I had. And at that moment, I don't think I've lived discrimination as much as other of my colleagues that come from other backgrounds. And it made me think a lot, because we have a lot of issues in universities, I think worldwide, but especially in Canada, related to research. A lot of discrimination related to research funding given to women, to racialized minorities, to people from the LGBTQ community. And I don't know if it's the fact that I'm a Latin American woman, and that all these questions of diversity inclusion became very popular in the last years, which weren't before. When we were talking about these questions of equity, diversity, and inclusion, no one was listening to us. So suddenly, I think I had a voice. I had a voice that was heard. And one of the main things I did is creating this network, this small community of practice related to questions of equity, diversity, and inclusion in Quebec universities. And this small community of practice became so big because people had issues related to that. We had allies. We have a lot of allies that want to work on having a more inclusive research, more inclusive universities, and it became a nonprofit organizations. And that is a privilege too that I acknowledge, and that I have a voice, and that I could also give a voice to other people. So I think that was a big turning point for me in the last 2-3 years.
Okay, and what do you think that organizations where you are working in, or other organizations, are doing right to promote diversity and inclusivity? And what do you think it can be done to make it better?
To me? Or?
Yes, any of you prefer.
I do.
Bibiana.
Yeah, I go. Because I think I didn't get a chance, I think, to answer the last question.
Thank you, Bibiana. Well, for me, the specific moments that I realized that being a woman in tech, it's also like helpful or it worked for me. I have several moments. I was born and raised in a super conservative family, and I was raised to be a wife, almost. You know, like attention to details and cooking and cleaning, and you have to be subtle and don't smile too much and don't laugh too much and blah, blah, blah. So I was really, really educated into be a nice woman when I joined my first engineering jobs. And that was not good because they treat me like if I were stupid or something like that, right? But I realized that I began working with hardware at Intel. So these small tweaks, and you have to take some really small devices and find things. And that was the first time that I said, oh, my education was good, because my mom always teach me to put a lot of attention to details. So I was really able to work with really small stuff. And also because I played with Polly Pockets. So I was really good with hardware and motherboards and things like that. That was one time. And I've had several others, but one really interesting is one of my students on the Data Science Academy I held here in Guadalajara, in Mexico. Once his final project was related to heart attacks, right? And he was showing these slides where males are more prone to heart attacks and things like that. And that's when I mentioned, do you know that it's not general, of course, but since females, we can like survive more pain, or I don't know how to say it correctly, since we can hold more pain, we are showing less in these statistics, but that doesn't mean that we don't get to have heart attacks. Females we normally died before we reached the doctor because we don't think it's that bad, related to like a heart attack. So that moment was when I thought, like, it's really important to be a female in these subjects, because there's a lot of studies that from ages and years before that we're all published and researched by males, and we've been able to rectify some of those paths and things that point to situations where not all the variables were considered, especially in talking about heart attacks. That was a big moment for me, saying, since I'm a woman, I can tell you that might not be right.
Thank you, Haydé. Sorry for jumping your answer, but I will repeat the other question. What do you think in the organizations you work in or other organizations, do you think they are good efforts to promote the inclusivity and diversity and equity? And what do you think we can do different in these international organizations, or particularly for LATAM diversity?
I have a quick one, and I'll give the space to my other two colleagues. Whatever it is that you're doing, fire 50% of your most homogeneous leadership group and hire diverse individuals to fill in those roles. So this is what Google, Facebook, and all the other tech companies are not doing, and they should be doing. They should fire 50% of their most homogeneous leadership team, and then fill it with people that come from all over the world. And I haven't seen, unfortunately, one single company that has taken such a bold move. I mean, there are companies for sure that have been given their seat to the most diverse person, the CEO seat to the most diverse person, and that's perfectly fine. Let's continue that trend and follow suit with the rest of the C-level team.
Okay, I could go ahead. It's a very drastic one, Priscila. If we could, and I mean, I wouldn't want to judge on that. We've had a lot of these discussions, you know, and how could we have more diversity in our institutions? I can't talk for other places around the world. Obviously, we have some laws, for example, in Quebec, where we need to have more representativity of some groups. However, we do have the backlash of these, what we call quotas, because we have the backlash that people are saying, oh, well, okay, we put maybe 50% of people from underrepresented groups, but they're just there to fill the quotas. They're not the experts. So we really have to have a really good argument on that. Why it's important to have these quotas, but it doesn't mean that they're not the experts and they're not competent on that, because now we're living this, like I said, this backlash on, for example, funding related to research in our universities, because we have governments that are saying, well, if your universities don't have more diverse directors of research chairs, where we're not giving you the money. And so it's sad to be that, but on the other side, if for other good like practices related to that, one of the things I've noticed lately in maybe the last year, especially with what everything came with the Black Lives Matter, you know, suddenly all institutions mobilized, had a statement on the importance of working against racism. However, it stays a lot in a statement. There's not much going on beyond that. You know, you publicly said that we're against racism, but there's not much going on. If you look, you know, it's like a marketing tool, and it's a business case. It's important to have that business case, but we need to work more on the moral case, on this social justice. Why are we doing this? What actions are we going to take? Because the actions are missing. And also one of the things that when we look at equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's not only one body or one group in the company that is going to be working on that. It's strategic. It needs to be like transversal. It's like if you have a big umbrella of the organization, everybody has to be put in these efforts of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And now that it's become more like, I don't know, what would I say, more popular, sometimes we tend to give that to HR. And like, I'm an HR specialist and everything. I'm not against that, but HR is not going to find the solutions for everything. It's not only HR, it's also finance. It's also research. So you need, everybody, all the instances in a company, in an institution need to be working in equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's not only one department. So that would be some of my suggestions.
I agree totally with what both Priscila and Bibiana said. Sometimes I was product of a quota. I was hired on my first tech job because of quota. And that they didn't even interview me. I was a recent graduate from computer systems engineering, and they hired me. I obviously had the skills, but everybody thought I was just a product of the quota. So they told me things like, it's because they hired you because you're a female. That's the only thing. So that's when I begin hating quotas. It's like, I'm a product of the quota, and that makes me stupid automatically. And that's not true. You're not even believing in my skills just because they have to hire women, and they are giving more bonuses to people that refer females. And that brings me to be stupid or something like that. It's like, it's not fair. On the other side, I think we should put minorities under our wings, like as mentors, we all talk about diversity and about bringing more females, more minorities, but I think we should, like Bibiana said, there's a lot of statements, but nothing is being done. So we should put I get a lot of emails, for example, having this academy here in Mexico, I get a lot of emails from females especially, asking how is the data science life, how is this, and blah, blah, blah. And I always kind of adopt them as friends, but also, I don't know, just to, being a female in tech is not just a matter of knowledge, but also a matter of self-esteem and bringing a lot of these soft skills and being able to deal with all these soft skills. And I hate when we talk about soft skills, because normally female groups in tech companies, they always talk about soft skills, but it's really, really important to enforce that you need to build like a car case in your heart, so nothing goes through it, that you have enough self-esteem so you can go there, stand up and say someone, hey, don't interrupt me, or let me finish my presentation, or that was my idea, or that was my joke, or whatever. And also, I think that in companies, we get this message that people that come to the company should be a match for the culture. But why don't you let your culture evolve through diversity, right? Sometimes everybody in the company even thinks the same and looks the same and everything is the same. And yeah, they totally matches the culture. But why don't you let your culture evolve through diversity? That's another thing.
You mentioned about this culture that also is like very homogeneous in different parts of the ecosystem. And I was thinking about this was not in the script, but
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm the only one who can't understand. You're breaking off. Maybe you can put the question on the chat.
Okay, I think Jen is trying to make a question about, do you think, so we've talked about diversifying, and Priscila, I love how concise you were on how we should do it. It's a strategy, and I love how concise it was. And I guess one question is investment in current like startup on all of this, is it diversifying? So one thing is to focus on the now and be like 50% off, which I think it's a good. I I don't know, I think it's a bold one, and I think it would be a fast way to drive diversity. But perhaps we also want to understand how is it changing. So not only on the present, but on the future, we always see investment diversifying. But Jenny, maybe you can phrase the question better you had in mind.
Yes, that I was thinking, you can hear me okay? Okay, perfect. That when I think about the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Mexico, for example, in Latam, people look more or less the same, people that are entrepreneurs. So do you think that also the investors, or how can we push this type of these other sectors like investments to move to diversity, different type of projects coming from different sectors, coming from different type of people that break with this standard?
I could begin on this one. I certainly believe that there was a study actually, and I think this study happened like 5 years ago, that most of the people, this talking to Silicon Valley, that get investment in Silicon Valley was heterosexual white guys, right? Or Asian, or white or Asian guys. And I think it's happening the same here in Mexico, you know, at least in Guadalajara, in the ecosystem that I have a lot to touch in. The other day, I become part of the board of a new startup that is forming, right? And I went to get a coffee with the CEO of this startup, and everything went well. He's awesome, whatever. But my conclusion was, he's a white heterosexual guy, so he's gonna make it, you know, like, he might not have the best ideas, he might not have the best technical team, but he's gonna make it because that's what people bet for. And I feel sorry for thinking that, but that's what society has bring us on, even here in Mexico. And I don't know, some of the funds and some of the investments also here in Mexico come from Silicon Valley. So it's not a surprise that they look the same also here in Mexico, right? And it's a really hard subject to talk about this and talk about privileges and talk about minorities and all those things. But I do think that we need to change that. Females almost, we can only get investments through like special events or special things. All female companies, all female funded, and blah. And that's my only opportunity. Why can I fight with the white heterosexual guy? And I'm not bad. I'm just making my point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To that point, I think we need bold objectives. I think we need bold people pushing for bold objectives. I think it is only in the US, from all the money that goes into funding, all VC money that goes into startups, only 15% goes to women, and only 0.3% goes to Black women founders. I don't even have the number for Latino founders because it's probably not even relevant. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's almost it is an insult. And to hear VCs and investors saying that they are looking into growing their portfolio to foster for more diverse founders, and consistently year after year looking at the numbers and seeing that nothing changes, it just makes me wonder that we are certainly not on the right track. We haven't really understood how big the issue is. We really haven't understood how much negative impact this is creating in the world. I work as, I am an entrepreneur, I have a startup, and I also work in corporate tech. And none of the two worlds really understand it. At least we haven't been able to identify a good solution, even if it's a temporary solution towards a big, ambitious, and hairy, big, bold goal. So I think if this group of people that have been in charge of finding solutions haven't been able to do so up until now, they're not the right people. Like, we need to change it. We need to change the ones making decisions. We need to change the sources of funding for startups. It will not be from the traditional VC world. It will have to come from somewhere else. And maybe it is a matter of promoting and elevating the voices and the monies of the non-traditional investors. Maybe we should be looking into another type of investment to fund women and minority startups. And I don't have an answer, but I do know that it is not going to come, at least not in the foreseeable future, from the people and from the groups that have been investing, because they will keep investing in what gives them the most certainty. And there's a confirmation bias. If I look at all of you and you come to pitch your ideas to me, and I know how bright and smart and capable women you are, I will fund you. I don't have the money now, but I could fund. I would if I could. But if we collectively were to pitch to a group of white, privileged men, most likely none of us would get funded. So I think it's not a matter of changing the founder or the innovator, but changing the ones that are holding the money.
I do agree a lot with you, Priscilla. I think it's not related to the person that is asking the funding, but who is the committee, who is the board giving this money? Because they're, like you say, it's biased. And if you have an homogeneous group of white men that is giving the funding, well, who are they? They're going to give the funding to people that are similar to them, because they're more comfortable with people being similar to them. If somebody is different or acts different, you were talking about the fact being a woman, but also when you're pitching, I don't know, I'm not the expert of pitching for a startup, but there's also these cultural differences. Probably somebody, I don't know, like from another country is not going to pitch the same thing, and is probably not going to look into you in the eyes, is probably not going to, be like, really humorous, because it's part of the culture, and they're going to be eliminated because they're different. They're uncomfortable with that. So I think there's a lot to be done with the people that are giving the money, and to open them up on these questions of biases and so on.
Thank you very much. This has been very, very interesting. I need to leave, but I will leave you with Rita to close the panel. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have you today. Rita, but I think she's frozen. Oh, we will wait for Rita to come back. But yes, I think this is very important, because we do not only need to focus on big and transnational companies, because they are not the only one with problems on diversity and equity diversity and equity in general. So we have to look in other sectors, also in education. You talked about women entering, for example, to technical careers. We still have very low numbers of women in technological careers. Here in the conferences and meetings, we have less than 30% of women. We had a hackathon last week, and we had less than 20% of women. And we actually had only one team of only women, 5 women, that decided not to participate because they thought they didn't have enough skills to compete with the other teams. So we are not doing everything that we can, and we have to look for new strategies to avoid this type of problems. So perhaps because we run out of time, I will only thank you in name also of Rita, and it was a pleasure to have you here, and I hope we can meet in other moment to have some other ideas to make this type of events better.